Hello and welcome to another tutorial. So this time around we are going to be continuing to expand upon the paintable canvas series, and in particular what we're going to focus on is some key performance improvements and also looking at some general quality of life improvements as well. So let's dive on in. So one of the things we identified last time was that the way we were handling drawing was actually quite slow. The reason being is that we're doing a lot of this get pixel and doing set pixels, and in particular when we're going and reapplying everything to when we do a redo after having undone something, that requires a lot of reprocessing of things. So we want to change this around and we want to make it a little bit faster. So the texture 2Ds are great for doing a bunch of things with them, but they do fall down when we're doing stuff like this. Using them directly as the surface that you're working with isn't really particularly good for performance. So what I want to do is I want to actually have something that wraps around that texture. So first thing I'm going to do is this paintable texture and everything here. I'm going to create a new class. So I'll have a public class and we'll call this our texture 2D wrapper. And that we want to make it that this will hold the texture, link texture, and then we will give this a constructor where that gets passed in. So texture 2D in texture, and we just do like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow approach I've talked about before of intentionally breaking things. So the type here for this, I'm going to switch that over to being our texture 2D wrapper. Then down here, I'm going to have our, we'll call it a texture 2D still. So this will be our local texture. We do our initialization of everything, but then paintable texture is a new texture 2D wrapper, and we provided that local one. So we're making it intentionally that everything that was referring to this paintable texture will now break. So that's good. We do actually want that to happen. It means our clear command here is going to need to behave a little bit differently. So that's one of the ones that we know will change. So we can get rid of a bunch of our UI ones there. But our clear to color, that is going to take in our texture 2D wrapper. Other things will break as part of that. That's okay. So set pixel, things like that, these are ones that we do want to bring those interfaces over to our texture 2D wrapper. So we'll be able to provide int x in y and a color in color. So at the moment, we won't have these do anything. I'm just setting up the interfaces, and then most of our work will happen in here. The reason for doing it this way is this eliminates a lot of kind of the calls that were typically sort of happening anytime we were modifying the texture. So I'm also going to remove this apply, because what I will do is in the paintable canvas here, when we get to update, I'm going to say F, sorry, I'll change that to F paintable texture is dirty. then paintable texture, apply. Again, those are things that we haven't implemented them yet, but I will set up. I'll actually make this a bool property. So is dirty, and that can be publicly gettable, but only privately settable. And we'll default it to true. So anytime we do a set pixel, that's going to do that. The apply, what that will do is we do a linked texture dot apply. So the idea behind this, having the dirty flag there, is so that we can really limit the amount of times we're actually doing the updating. So we take the actual update process out of the individual drawing commands, things like that. So there'll be a couple of other spots that'll probably be grumpy at us. So that we can get rid of the apply from there. So we don't have a getPixel function yet. So let's set up our getPixel function. And this will be public color getPixel. And same thing. For now, I will just have that return magenta, just to make sure that we've caught all of the errors. So that looks okay, but we'll double check in Unity. Nothing's grumpy at us. So now we can start to make these do things. So a big part of the stuff that causes the current get and set pixel operations to be super slow is the fact that they are directly modifying the texture and then we're doing updating afterwards. It's a really sort of slow process. So if we take a look at our texture though, as well as having the options for getting a pixel, we also have this get pixels. And this is actually what we're going to make use of. So we can do get pixels, and then we are going to store here a color pixel data. So we'll store pixel data. So when it is dirty, that means pixel data will have been modified. So how we then work with this is we would do linked texture, set pixels, so we're setting them all in one go, and we give it that pixel data again. So that makes that operation a lot quicker. We've also, with the wrapping we've done, it's only going to do this when it knows the texture is actually dirty. And I could, just for extra measure, do a double check of that here. This would be something where you could also consider asserting. That would also be an option. But the first thing I will do is set is dirty to false. So that's good. We've got the applying logic happening. Now, this is a flat array. So we need to do a little bit of logic for actually working with this. So to get a pixel, that's probably a good one to look at initially. So we would get a pixel by saying pixel data, and then generally the way these are organized is we would do in X plus in Y multiplied by our linked texture and its width in pixels. We do the same logic for when we're doing a set pixel. So we would say pixel data, like that, is equal to that color. So we can test this out. First thing we want to be checking is Does the drawing still actually work? I want to make sure we haven't gone and completely broken everything with it. So that's going to be the first thing we check, is can I still go and draw? And the answer is yes, I can. So that's good. Let's change color. And that's working. Let's draw a few more times. And now, if I undo, this was something where previously that process of undoing and redoing things like of that was really quite slow. So let's see what happens now if we undo. So in this case, nothing's actually changed. So these changes will help out somewhat with the performance, but there's actually a couple of sort of hidden things in this that you wouldn't necessarily assume are going to be slow. For example, this accessing of the width can actually take a noticeable amount of time. So I'm going to cache here the linked texture width. Reason being, that saves me having to actually pull that data out all the time. So that's our linked texture dot width. And it's one of the dangerous things with properties. Like, I love properties, I make extensive use of them, but they can hide some nasty performance issues that you don't necessarily realize are there. So generally the big things that will cause sort of performance problems are stuff like, things being allocated when we don't need them to be, stuff like of that. Can take a lot of time, or doing stuff that's going out to the GPU. There can be waits and stalls there. So we're going to test this out. It's probably still going to have some issues. So we'll draw some red, we'll draw some blue. Let's draw a bit of green. Just want a chunk of things that we need to be updating. So let's go and undo. And that does still take a noticeable amount of time. We'll see the same when we do redo. So there is still a bunch of processing that is needing to happen there. And one of the big things is if we take a look at the painting for the drawing of what that actually does. One of the big things is likely this get pixel by linear. So we have optimized the get pixel, but the get pixel by linear is a little bit more complicated. Because that's a whole bunch of data that we don't necessarily, we don't cache that. So what I would ideally want to be doing there is, because we loop through the particular sort of brush locations, so we need to think about how we want this to work. We are looping over the scaled brush and height and everything. So what I would actually look at doing is I want to be able to do something here where I say, okay, well, active brush and prepare, or maybe set scale. And we give it the scaled brush width and the scaled brush height. And then here, I want to just be able to go, hey, get pixel, and we give it the brush X and the brush Y. So we go to using integers like we're doing with everything else. So that would mean that we don't need to do this UV lookup. We can get rid of this bit as well, so our code becomes shorter. But now we need the brush to support these set scale and the other functions that we've got. So if we go to our brush, I'm going to have a public void set scale int in width, int in height. And I might actually refer to those as scaled width and scaled height. We'll store here current width and current height. Now, I think with those, I'm going to actually make those nullable. The reason being is that we might not need to, we don't have them populated initially, and I want to easily be able to check that. So if we have no current width or no current height, actually I have to, so the problem with switching between C++ and C# all the time is that I forget at times and go and default to using C++ syntax. So if current width or height are null, then what I would say is that current width is our brush texture dot width, and we do the height. So then here I'm going to check if current width is not equal to the scaled width, or current height is not equal to the in-scaled height. And I'm going to have regenerate. Actually, I might make that following the pattern we've used before. So that looks good. So we're just checking a couple of conditions of, okay, has it been newly set up, or have we tried to change the scaling of it? If we have, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to essentially do a lot of what was already happening here, and I will do that outside. I'll do that actually within the particular brush. Also going to move this out to here. And I might also even actually do this when we are storing the brush itself. So when we actually set the brush, it's probably a good point to do this. So that'll be in the execute command for executing the command to set the brush. So at this point, I want to do that. So I think that is good. This would use active brush width. Actually, that should be height. So again, I'm putting more stuff into the brush itself. The reason being, we calculate things then a lot less often. And that's going to make our life a lot easier. So that looks good. So then we know we're going to need width and height properties here. So what I will have, let's actually change this around. So these will both be public, publicly gettable, private on the set, and I will default those to, let's go for -1. We'll do the exact same thing with height as well. So if current width is less than 0 or current height, and again, we get rid of current on these because we're just setting it in the end then to that scaled version. So, okay, that looks good. Then if it's dirty, we need to regenerate the actual data. So what I will do is we'll have our color, and this will be cached brush data, and that is going to be a new color, and it will be width by height. We would update this here like that, so those are set correctly. So okay, if they're different, we've got it properly set. These are using the right elements there. We can implement our get pixel function now. So get pixel. This is going to look quite similar to our other function that we did in the texture wrapper. So what this will do, it will return cached brush data, and it will be in X plus in Y multiplied by width. So now that we've got that array, we can start to populate it. So it's going to be a fairly similar setup to what we had before, where Y is 0, Y is less than height. We'll cache the Y component of the UV, which is going to be float of Y divided by, same thing with height. Then we have, and I might just duplicate the loop to make it easier on ourselves. This is going to be obviously not Y for the inner one, this will be X. So we have like that. And we update those ones that are height to width. Then what I would do is say, okay, well, cache brush data, and I don't like its ordering for that, so I'll actually do it as X plus like that. That is going to be our brush texture. So we've already got that here. So our brush texture, and we go and say get pixel by linear. We give it the UV coordinates. So what this means is now when we actually set the brush, it will go and do the full set of caching of all of that. So these get pixel functions here are now a much quicker lookup. So let's test that out. Let's see what the performance of that's like. So firstly, we want to make sure that it still works, which it seems to still work okay. We'll draw stuff with a couple of different colors, different brushes as well. That's good. So when we undo that, it's a lot quicker. There's still a little bit of a delay. So we've still got a little bit of a delay there, but that actual process is significantly faster now though. We've eliminated a lot of the overhead that happens with the drawing. So there's further things that we could potentially do there. There's definitely some scope for you could make use of shaders, things like that with it. In general, what we want to be doing is wherever possible, anything where it's an operation that's happening a lot of times, we kind of want to eliminate that out of it. So, for example, with the brushes, if it's only ever using one of the components of it, we could actually just store a lot of that data out. So there's further things we could do, starting to get a little bit more, sort of specific with it. There's a couple of other improvements I want to make to this though. So if I draw like this, and then wait a whole bunch of time, draw again, and I've lifted the mouse in between. Then when I go and undo, clears all of it. It's not really what we want. The normal behavior we'd expect with that is that it would actually close off the command. So if we take a look at our setup of where this actually happens, So if we go to update, we're checking here if the mouse button is down. What I would also then do is I would say here, I might actually put it like this, of if mouse button is down, then we do that. Otherwise, if our most recent command, and if it reckons that it can be extended, then I actually want to close that off. So I'll go for close command. And all that will do is make it that that particular command no longer can be extended. So we'll have a public virtual void close command. That will do initially nothing. But then if I go to just the draw command, because the draw command is the only one that can be extended. So this one, what I will end up doing is have public, not a public bool actually, just a bool can extend let's change that to is able to, or is allowed to extend. So by default that will be true. But when we close the command, we're going to set that to false. What that will mean is if we raise the mouse button, that it then goes and closes it off, which is going to work a lot better. So now I draw up here, lift up the mouse, draw down here, lift up the mouse, and do more in the center. Now when I go and undo, it only undoes the last one since the mouse actually got pressed. So that's good. That gives us some more options there. There's some other stuff that I could kind of do with this in terms of, with our brush, being able to control how it gets applied. Because we have the logic here in terms of tint colors, things like that. But what if I want to be able to control some mode options? So what I could do is I could have here public enum e mode, and there's a few different ones that I could set up. So what we're currently doing is we're just directly lerping to the particular color, but we might want to actually just sort of be doing some blending options like that. So what I'm going to do is set up so that we will have a few modes. We'll have normal, which is what our current one is. We'll have multiply, screen, and overlay. And then internally here, I'm going to set up a bunch of helper functions that can do the performing of these different operations. So we'll have, and I'll make these protected because child ones might actually want to make use of these directly. So we'll have blend op, and we'll have multiply. So this will take in the image color, and it will take in the target color, or the brush color. So multiply is pretty straightforward. We return the multiplication of those two. But where we get to things being a little bit more interesting is then the other ones we'll have. We'll also have our screen one, and we'll have overlay. So how screen generally works is we would do 1 minus our image color multiplied by 1 minus the brush color. So we're kind of flipping both of those, and then we flip it back again with 1 minus all of that. That's the general maths for the screen operation. So at least in terms of what you'll find happens in most sort of image editing software. Overlay is a little bit different. So if the image color is less than, so in image color, if that is less than 0.5, then usually what we will do is we will return 2 times in image color times brush color. Otherwise, oops, that should have been multiply like that. That's good. So if the image color is less, we do 2 times and we multiply like that. Otherwise, the maths is a little bit different. So if it's less than 0.5, we do that calculation. Otherwise, what we do is we do 1 minus 2 times by 1 minus our in image color. So essentially very similar to the screen operation. 1 minus our in brush color. So that's good. Now how we actually use these is we need to be told the mode. So our mode, in mode. And then what we can check here is which one of those we actually go and make use of. So if the in mode, if that is normal, there's actually nothing we need to do. If it is multiply, then what we would say is the desired colors red is we use our blend up multiply. We give it the current color red, and we give it the desired color red. And we do the exact same thing with the green and the blue components. This will just allow us to give sort of different effects with the brushes, and it's something we could then extend further as well if we're wanting to. So that's what happens for multiply. We can then do similar checks for the other ones. So if it is screen, and if it is overlay, and then all we do is we swap out which actual function it's running. That's why we set up these little sort of blend up ones. Makes our life a lot easier for actually working with it. So that looks good. Now our blending operation, we need to have that actually have a command for it, because with the approach we're going for, it's pretty important. And we need to be providing the mode here as well. So I am going to set up a setting here. We'll have our E mode. Actually, that ends up being our brush mode, active brush mode, which we will default that to normal and pass that through. But we're going to need a command that actually works with that. So this is a good test of our command setup of, okay, how much is involved in adding in a new one. So if we go to our paintable canvas and our commands, well, first thing I'll do is set up the script for it. So we have painting command, set brush mode, and we'll fix that up. base brush. This is going to keep track of, whoops, not base brush, that is base painting command. So we're going to keep track of the brush here. So the brush and the mode to set. And we'll have same sort of thing, set brush mode. We know that it's going to have to bring in this. So in mode to set. We know from ones like color and that we do want to include the undoable logic as well. So it does make sense for this to be able to undo. And that goes base and in is undoable. It's not really too much else that it needs to do. We'll set up an execute function while we're here. So ref base brush e mode out mode. And that actually becomes out mode equals mode to set. So it shouldn't be too much involved then to add in these commands. So what I would do is everywhere where we've got stuff for like executing the commands, well, if the command being executed is a painting command and a set brush mode, then it's going to do the same logic we've done with a bunch of these. We execute like that. If it's an undo or replay, then we're going to need to do some logic there. So that will be a case of if it's undo or replay. I would say we on sync UI with brush mode, and we invoke like that. So we don't have that event set up. So I'll go and create that now. And we don't have any UI working for this to actually process it, but that's okay. Key thing is that we're wanting to get it so that all of the bits and pieces are ready to go. So, okay, looks good so far. We'll add in public void select brush mode, base brush. So again, we append the command. And to know whether this should actually be, treated as something that is undoable, that is something where I probably am going to need to make the active brush mode nullable. So we'll come up here and the active brush mode, I'll make it nullable. That might make a couple of things grumpy, but that's okay. A lot of the stuff should be pretty much fine. Our drawing commands are correct. So that should be okay. Let's see once it's actually properly saved that that warning might go away. Just check what's happening in the rest of the places. This we would need to probably change that to value because we did mark that as, oh, I put the question mark in the wrong spot. That's why I got grumpy. So let's check that provides a ref there to that. That means, like we did here, that needs to also be like that. For syncing, get the value, and active brush mode, and value. So that looks pretty good. Set brush mode is there for the execute. When we go and undo, its undo behavior is fine to be the find last, the default one. So there's nothing special that needs to happen for it. So that should mean we can actually put together the UI for setting the brush mode. So what I might actually do is in the brush picker here, I am going to create another little panel, brush modes, do the same logic we've used for all these other ones, and we'll position this down the bottom and not taking up so much space. Maybe just only 50 is probably reasonable. We'll pad it a little bit on the sides. So it does mean our brush list, we offset that a bit. So that's good. And we'll fix the scroll bar there, was not taking up all the space that it should. So brush modes, I'm going to create a couple of buttons. We'll have normal, we'll have multiply, screen, and overlay. Now, I don't have any particular graphics or things like that for this, so I'm just going to rely on having the actual sort of text there be correct. Oops, not overlap, overlay. So we'll give this our usual horizontal layout group in this case. Give it full control over the size of the children and a little bit of padding, but align things in the center. That's good. We'll update the text of all of these. Let's call that normal. Yep. So we've got norm, mult, green. Actually, we can probably just shrink the size of the text of these a bit, and that'll fit. Multiply. Because the font is not too far off, so we don't need to actually change the size of the text that much. 22. Go for 18. There we go. So that fits okay. So we need to set up a little bit more UI. We need scripts here for a UI brush mode picker. Make sure that's attached onto here. This, we're going to set up some fairly straightforward logic for this. So we'll have a function, public void on brush mode 1, mode button clicked. Now, one of the annoying things with, at least currently in this version of Unity, is that dynamic ones will not work with our actual sort of enums for being able to provide those through. So that's something where, to get around that and kind of just make our lives a little bit easier, what I will do is create a script and we'll call this brush mode element. And this one's job is going to be just to link to our actual brush mode base brush. Linked mode. And then because this is going to be able to be toggled off and on, I want to just store here the Unity Engine UI button, linked button, and we'll retrieve that in a wake. I don't always bring this in as a using, especially if I'm only doing a couple of controls, but we might as well just bring it in. So we get component button. That's good. I would like this to be easily accessible as a property potentially, but what I'll do is initially just get these linked up. So you can select multiple things in the UI like that, and then you can drag in the actual script to have it attach it to all of them. So that's good. So multiply, we just set all of these to the correct one. So this is for screen and then for overlay. The reason I'm doing this is just going to make our life a lot easier in that in the brush modes here, what I can actually do is I can grab all of those mode buttons and do any of the actual sort of binding to on-clicked stuff potentially as part of that. So we'll have public void on-clicked, and I'll create here using Unity event or Unity engine.events. I'll create another thing here that will just be our Unity event, and all this will give back is that brush mode. So on brush mode selected. I will make this public just so that other things can easily sort of link to it. So that's good. Then what I can do down here is on brush mode selected, invoke, and with linked mode. Then in our brush mode picker, well, this we can do a few more bits and pieces. It is a lot of messing around to link up all of these different ones, but it's a necessary thing. So that's actually all good. Can leave that as public. This, actually, I will go for serialized field and just manually link it up because there's that few of them. But it's not really a hassle to manually link them up. So all of these, we give them a on-click event. In every case, the thing that it's running is the brush mode element, and we link that up to on-clicked. So we just do that for all of these ones. Thing gets linked up. Same here. So it is a bit repetitive. If I thought I was going to have a lot of modes, I would look at setting this up as a sort of generated bit of UI, but we don't have that many modes and they all are sort of hard-coded, so I don't think there's a big benefit to it. So with those linked up, we can then go and actually run in our UI brush mode picker. That. So these have feedback now for indicating which mode has been selected. This now needs to be able to send that to the rest of our actual UI. So similar to what we were doing with the other ones, we will bring in and using Unity engine .events, and I will have here a serialize field, Unity event, base brush, and on brush mode selected. So on brush mode selected gets invoked like that. We know we'll need stuff for undo support. So on set brush mode, and that needs to provide the mode. And similar to what we were doing with these other ones, so if we go and take a look at the actual brush picker, so that had a allow notifications. So we're going to do the same thing here. Not that we're making use of that yet, but we want to at least have it ready and available for us making use of. So, okay, that looks good so far. I'll get rid of those functions for now. Let's just get all of these bits linked up. So when we select the brush mode, we talk to the paintable canvas and select brush mode. Paintable canvas, we do the link so it can synchronize the UI. So we link that up and UI brush mode picker, set brush mode. So that's good. We'll update this prefab while we're at it because that's changed. So, okay, we've got the two things linking and talking to each other there. We don't have any highlighting of what the active mode is. That would be useful to actually have there. So I will also have here linked button image, and we'll do the same thing for grabbing the image. Just because that way then I can have stuff for indicating if it's selected or not. So I'll have a serialize field, color, selected color, and a not selected color. And then we'll just have public void on, actually set is selected. This will just allow us to actually go and provide some visual feedback, which is really important. It's something where I wouldn't want to sort of start using it and properly testing it until I know that this side is actually working, just because it makes our life a lot easier. So that's the brush mode element. Set is selected should work there. I need to actually have a list here of all of those bits of UI. So a list of our UI brush element. And this is our brush UI elements. Then what I would do here is for each brush mode UI. Oops. It's UI brush mode element. So brush mode UI in, rename these properly. So what I would say is, okay, brush mode UI. We set if it's selected based upon whether it's actually going and matching for the particular mode. So brush mode UI, if that is equal to the mode, and that's good. We don't actually need to do anything with the allow notifications. It might be the case that in the future we did have stuff we do with that, but for now we don't need to. So brush mode UI, we need to be able to access that mode from it. So what I will do is, because I don't want things messing with it, I will have a base brush mode, and I'll just call this mode. That. So, okay, we've got a way of indicating if something is selected with the brush mode. So that can go and update the particular ones. What I would do is similar here, and it's already got the mode, so that looks good. We're not using it in enough different places where I'd worry about wrapping that in its own function. I think that's not quite necessary at this stage. But let's find out how this works. The other thing I might also then do is in void start, and we'll go set brush mode, and we'll set the mode to normal, and we will send notifications. So this should mean the UI is up to date. Now, none of these have we actually configured the selected color. So what I will do is configure the selected color to be like a pale yellow. So let's run this. So nothing has changed here in terms of, it is sending the commands, but the image's color hasn't actually updated. So we know then that some of the stuff is obviously not fully working. So what I would be doing is checking in our brush mode element this, just to be sure what's going on there. So run it, and immediately we notice that it didn't actually go into that at all, which means that set is selected did nothing. So we want to check, okay, did start get run for it? The start does get run, but what we'll notice is we didn't link up any of those elements. So we have to go and here, link up. So our brush mode elements has all of those ones. So really easy to miss when we're setting up a lot of UI. But now if we test this, normal's highlighted, that's changing properly, so that's good. If I go to draw, then that's working. Now, if I change this over to multiply, nothing visibly different, but if I use a different color, notice the way that it applies where the red's there is very different versus what otherwise would happen. So these are actually behaving the way that we want them to. It's giving us different ways of manipulating the colors, which is going to allow us to have a lot more control over how things look. So we'll just double check again. Now we do, on the very first load, get an error where it's trying to actually run this drawing function. So at this point, that means that it has not had a mode actually set. So what I'm going to do is just double check that in our paintable canvas, this select new brush mode command does actually come in. So we'll run this, and it hasn't actually gotten run. So select brush mode was not getting called. So this should be sending notifications, except the reason it's not is we actually did need to be checking it, and we should be doing on mode button clicked in mode. So we should find now that we don't get that initial error when we go to draw. And we don't. So we can happily, easily draw on this. We have our different color mode options working here of how it blends, which looks quite cool. So you can get some very, very cool effects with that. We've got the ability to undo and redo. We improved the performance of that process a bit there as well. And also made it so that if you do just a little bit of drawing, it can then go and easily sort of close off the previous command, and that little bit of drawing is in its own separate one, so you can undo sections of it whenever you have lifted the mouse. So that's really the main functionality that we were going for with our paintable canvas system. If there are other things you would like to see added into this, do mention those in a comment below. I've also made this available as a package, so there is a link in the description to the Unity package for this, which, like with any of the other projects of mine, you can use this in any of your own projects, commercial or non-commercial ones. Thanks, folks. Hope you found the video interesting and helpful. If you have, chuck in a like and subscribe. It really helps out. It's really appreciated. If you have any questions, chuck those in a comment below. If you're looking for the code for the project, the code is available up on GitHub, and there's a link to that in the description. There's also a link to the Unity package, as I mentioned. And as I said, you can use this in any of your own projects, commercial and non-commercial ones. And if you're looking for other ways to support the channel, then I do have a Patreon, and there is a link to that in the description below. But until next time, bye.